Earthlings, it is the Wavetable Groovebox once again. It's Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 o'clock in the UK, I think, 6 o'clock in mainland Europe, and some other times in other places. Welcome along. My name is Howard. I'm your intrepid host for the next 30 minutes or so. This session is presented by the crew here at Wavetable. That's us. Move myself into the corner to give some nice real estate. I'm on the furry chair today. You can see I've got the kind of little furry chair back to give myself a little comfort to my aching bones so I can give this Groovebox all the love and attention it deserves. All right, so we're going to get into this episode 4 today, no less. Oh my goodness me. Time flies. Right, what is all this about? Let's get straight into it. Episode 4 of the Groovebox. 2 things we do here. Number 1, stories. Help you tell stories to build your business, your project, your career, your community. Stories to connect with community, to make change happen, to move people to action. It's all about crafting stories. We're going to be getting into that a bit today. Second thing this session's all about is helping you develop workshops, conferences, courses, and many other human interactions. How do we make them better? How do we make them engaging? How do we make them fun? In fact, how do we make them meaningful? Yeah, that's what this is about. 2 things, stories and creating beneficial, meaningful, magical human interactions. All right, a little bit about us, the quick sales pitch, because that's what we got to do. Wavetable creates unique experiences rooting in learning, discovery, and community. We do it for a couple of different groups of people. If you're working with your employees, your teams at work, we create lots of cool experiences like onboarding programs, offsites, gatherings, other such things. If you are working with customers or clients or fans, we build conferences. We're building a conference right now. We create community initiatives, social impact, brand platforms, summits, all kinds of good stuff. Anywhere where there's learning, discovery, community happening, that is what we love to do. You can send me an email if you want to send an email to learn more about what we do, howard@wavetable.net. As I said to someone yesterday, the .com was taken. We could have gone cool with the .co or something, but we just went old school back to 1993 and bought a .net because that's what we do. All right, let's get into today's show. Straight into the Groovebox. We're going to be doing a couple of things today. We've got hot and cool, which is our usual little riff on what's hot and what's cool in the world of Wavetable right now, things that we've seen in the world that we think are interesting. Hot and cool first, and then we've got some Q&A. So it's episode 4. We're going to start with hot and cool, and then we're going to get into today's question. It's an interesting question. It's a question all about slide design. How do I design interesting slides? More on that in just a second. All right. Here we go with hot and cool for today. Whoa, there's me at full size. We don't want that. Let's go here. No, let's go over here. I'm going to move these around, move my face again. I seem to have scaled up. Whoa, there we go. Scale myself down to something a little bit more appropriate. This is Marshall McLuhan on the right of me. There he is. Marshall coined this term hot and cool when he referred to media. Hot media being a type of media that immerses one's sense completely, like going to the movies, for example. Cool media being something that maybe engages many different senses, but in a less complete way. There's a little bit more for the viewer, engager to explore, to interact with, to think about, to discover. Both really valuable, both really wonderful, but how we use them matters. So in this little section of the show, hot and cool, we share one hot thing and one cool thing that we have seen recently that we think is interesting and that maybe you will be inspired by. Today's hot one is, courtesy of Animal, drumming. Today's hot one, more specifically, is this. This is a documentary called Count Me In on Netflix. Really love this. Seems a little bit odd to be in the hot and cool for Wavetable when we're talking about learning and connection and stuff like that. There is actually good reason for this. Drummers are really fascinating creatures. There's a lot of discipline involved in being a drummer. There's a lot of community. Drummers are very kind of social creatures. They're very tribal. Speaking of which, drums are very tribal in their origin. Drums are maybe the oldest instrument around, I'd probably wonder. Drummers are also not really front and center. They're often kind of at the back doing their thing, but they're keeping time, keeping everything moving and grooving, keeping that rhythm. I really like drummers. Great documentary called Count Me In on Netflix. There's a very loud siren going past the studio right now. There it is. My apologies. Speaking of noise, we get noise from the drummers, noise from the sirens. But that is today's hot. Count Me In on Netflix. Really into that. That's today's hot bit of media to check out. Moving on to the one that's cool. This is a sad one to share, but I want to sort of take the positives and the wonderfulness out of this. You probably heard that earlier this week, Virgil Abloh passed away at a very tragically young age of 41, I think. Really interesting guy, very creative person. I found this little GIF, which I'm just going to sort of let play for a second. I'm just going to remove myself from this for just a second. Oh, other way. Remove myself so it can let it play message. Yeah, I already did this. His concept around his creativity, just getting better by putting stuff out, not worrying if people don't notice, if it's bad. If it's good, then it works great, but I can just keep moving. So he's a really interesting creative person, most well known as the creative director for Louis Vuitton, amongst other things. But actually, the thing we wanted to share of his that people don't really talk about as much is this project. This is a cool project. I'll scale this one up because it's well worth it. So back in 2019, Virgil worked with Nike to broaden youth access to both creative capital and kind of diversify the creative industries. Created a project called the Recreation Center, the Nike Lab Recreation Center, hosted in Chicago, where he was from. Free creative workshops for young people. Some creators also received free mentorships led by him and some of the Nike team. And then in 2020, he created something called the All-Star Academy, which was combining youth basketball coaching with learning in design, sports science, sports journalism, all the things around the topic of basketball that we don't always think about. Love this so much. A lot of the work we do at Wavetable is kind of geared around this sort of idea and this thesis as well. So we think this is super cool. Virgil Abloh definitely left a legacy in fashion, but I think also around elevating talent as well. I think a lot of people kind of forgot that. And so I think it's really worth highlighting some of the amazing work that he did. So that is a little bit of a sad, cool one today, but still something to be happy about, that he left legacy of amazing work for the world, particularly young people who want to get into the creative industry. So that is our cool one for today. All right, that was the hot, that was the cool. We're going to switch it up into the Q&A, and I've gone really large again. I'm sorry. Don't know what's going on today. It's a bit weird. All right, scale my. You don't want too much of me. You don't want too much of me. It's too much. Too much, Howard. All right, let's get into the Q&A. Today's Q&A is on slide design. Here we go. How can I design a slide deck that really engages my audience? Oh, by the way, I'm not a designer, so I'm not a graphic designer. I haven't been trained in presentation building. I don't have maybe access to paying for some amazing creative director to come and do stuff. How do I design slide decks that really engage an audience and actually works? Slide decks are interesting. They are used all over the place. Death by PowerPoint is something that we often sort of think about as a horrible meme. We've probably all sat through presentations that are horrible. Hopefully this one is not one of them, hopefully. But often they don't really work very well. But slides are magical, and they are really good ways of communicating. There's actually a new book by a guy called Russell Davis called I Learned Everything I Knew I Learned on PowerPoint, I think, something like that. I'll put it in the show notes afterwards. I've kind of forgotten what it is. But anyway, really great book about PowerPoint and its benefits. But most people don't use it very well. So how can we use it better? These what we're going to get into for the rest of today's Groovebox. All right. Let's start with a few tips on how we can design slide decks that actually engage an audience, whether we're doing a workshop, a course, teaching things, something else. Here we go. It's a handful of tips. It's going to be a short session today because, frankly, we did 55 minutes of wonderfulness with Katie last week, and I need my lunch today. So it's going to be a short one, but that's all good. All right, let's start here. Let's dance. Now, I can't dance. Maybe you can. But a good way to think about slides maybe when we're delivering stuff is kind of as backing dancers. They help us tell the story or augment what else is going on. And they can be nice to look at if we happen to be maybe off doing something else, maybe designing something, or if we're in person, doing an activity of some sort. But they shouldn't be the main thing all the time. More like a backing dancer. Help tell the story, augment what's going on, cool to look at, cool to observe. And we should be able to survive without the slides if we need to, because obviously things break, plans change. So we don't want to be completely dependent on them either. Thinking about like a live gig or a music video, the backing dancers are awesome. They add a lot to it, but the main performer, the main presenter, artist can survive without them. Not to disown or just do down the backing dancer, but the backing dancers are a great way of thinking about slides. It's a good prime. All right. Oh, moving on. Let's make myself a bit smaller to get this in. 10, 20, 30. What on earth is he talking about? Here's a quick tip on slide design. This is from Guy, who's kind of one of those startup guru VC type people. This one applies to pitch decks in startup world when you're pitching to investors. The 10 slides. The 20 is for minutes. The 30 is for the font size. 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30 font size. This is a really good rule of thumb for all kinds of presentations. Actually, this is quite good when you're teaching and running workshops as well. It's really worth thinking about that maximum number of 30. At the most is when we want to change formats. We don't want to do one format, whether it's slides or a Q&A or an activity without any adjustments, for more than 30 minutes, more like 15 or 20 if we can. So 10 slides at a time before we change up. We don't want to do more than, say, 20 minutes of something at a time. And we want to keep our font size at 30 minimum so people can read it. We're going to get more into legibility and accessibility in a second. This is a really nice, simple rule. You can play around with this a little bit once you get more experience of building stuff and doing decks in a kind of live setting. But this idea of 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30 font size minimum is a really nice rule of thumb to start with. All right. Moving on from one guru to another. This is Adam. He's a very popular psychologist, academic. I think he's at Wharton University, author. One of those people you're like, he is just so smart. How do I don't know if I could ever be smart like him. But anyway, one of the very smart things he shared is around words on slides. Now, I'm a bit guilty of this because, hey, I do put words on slides. I'm actually going to move myself up so I feel sort of almost appear to him. Appear to some degree with a bigger head and more hair and a big beard. But anyway, whatever. Something Adam says about words on slide is don't put them on your slide at all first. That's the first thing. And if they are on the slide, don't say them out loud. Now, I've already broken this rule. So if you have words on slides, don't put them on there in the first place. Secondly, don't say them out loud. Now, the reason for this is a few studies have shown that the redundancy of hearing and reading a message at the same time increases cognitive load. This makes learning and absorbing more difficult. So if I start just talking over this and saying it and reading it, how can I design a slide that really engages an audience? You're probably struggling to tune in and tune out with what's going on. Whereas when we have this, it's probably easier to have the cognition of what's going on. You can probably got more of an understanding. It's going to be easier to absorb. An image speaks 1,000 words, as they say. So there's deliberately not much text on this one. So putting loads of text on the slides, definitely avoid. You don't want to read it out if you can avoid it. It's difficult to. We're going to talk a little bit about how we can design in a smart way while using some words in a second, because realistically, using no words on your slides, that's going to be quite difficult. But you can just use a few to try and minimize that overload for people. So the redundancy of both hearing and reading a message at the same time makes the cognitive load higher. That makes learning more difficult. So when you're just reading loads of stuff off a slide, that ain't going to work. Try and minimize where you can. Speaking of which, let's move on to 2 fonts and 3 things. Quick guide for design. I'm not a designer, but I've learned a few things about design over my many years. I suggest using a maximum of 2 fonts where possible. If you've got like 16 fonts on a page, people are going to go nuts. And ideally use that rule of thirds. You might know that from the world of art and design. But the world of the thirds actually applies to things on a slide as well. Try and put a maximum of 3 things on a slide. If we go back to the 10, 20, 30, there's only 3 things on there, max. There's only 2 fonts, 3 slides. One little sort of trick with this is that you can use just one font with 2 different weights, regular and bold. That can be 2 fonts. Very, very simple. I'm only using Helvetica in today's session. That's all I'm using, just with different colors. Same weight, in fact. Keeps it nice and clean. All right, let's talk a little bit around images. because we want to use images wherever possible. Images full bleed always looks nice. There we go. This is an image from the lovely Unsplash website. Picture tells 1,000 words. We've just popped a couple of words on their slide design. We could maybe even just use less than that. Let's talk about words and pictures together. So using pictures, using images, full bleed, you're gonna be careful on contrast. So I try and knock the images back maybe by like 30% darkness, put a tint on them, and then drop some words over the top. We're going to do a future session on how to actually craft the story part of this and how to select images and select text for slides. We're going to do that in a future Groovebox, so watch out for that. But a couple of tips for now with words. Speaking of the words thing, it's easy to use loads of words, right? But actually, why would you use 100 words when 10 will do? You could probably get your messaging down. Again, we don't want to say the whole thing because people aren't going to remember it or they're not going to be able to listen at the same time. In fact, why would you use 100 words when 10 will do? Maybe we could even say this. Why 10 words, use 5? Same thing, right? Why would you use 100 words when 10 will do? We could even just say, why 100 words, use 10? Why 10 words, use 5? We can make that even shorter. We've taken from this was 10 words, this one's 5. Haha. So same message, really succinct. Getting succinct is really important. We don't want to put loads and loads of stuff in there. You can see here, I've used some white background to get this. Where is there? There we go. Use some white background to get this contrast really nice and we can see what's going on. So keep the words minimal, drop back your image, whack a background on the text if you want to, and keep your words, keep it succinct as you can. All right, a couple more things for today's session. Next thing, remember the flavors. This is something around workshops. We talk about the idea of workshop flavors a lot here at Wavetable. You might be doing like a strategy workshop or a educational workshop, or you might be doing a vibes workshop that's just purely vibing. The flavor matters. So for example, if you're doing like lots of concepts and technical content, you are going to need more slides. If you're doing a craft workshop, people are just making stuff, you may need none at all, in fact, although actually having a handful of visual aids can be really helpful. A few nicely designed clear slides can go a really long way though. So whether flavor is alignment or strategy or business or whatever it is, whichever flavor is worth, I think, having a few visual aids because it can be really helpful for people, particularly visual learners. They might want to take photos of the slides. They might like scribble down some kind of the diagrams that are there, but you want to remember the flavor. If you're doing a craft workshop where people are making stuff hands-on all the time, we don't want to have 200 slides. There's no need. People can go and make stuff. Meanwhile, if you're doing a business kind of MBA style tech shop, you probably want to have quite a few slides because they're not going to be able to get their heads around all the concepts. You're not going to be able to explain a complicated model or diagram just in words. We're going to need pictures. We're going to need images. So remember your flavor. Think about what flavor of workshop you're building and add slides as appropriate. All right, important last bit before we finish up for today. Hey, can you read this at the back of the room? Probably not. Can you see my face? Maybe you can. It's about accessibility. This is usually the thing that comes to mind when we talk about accessibility. You say accessibility, often I go, oh, okay, so that's like a visuals thing, right? Well, it is this. We talked about font size, the size 30, talked about the contrast and using different fonts, all that kind of good stuff. Obviously, you know, that's kind of hard to read. And you can see that there. That's not that easy to read. That was a good idea, but unfortunately I'm in front of it, so we can't see that. So accessibility shows up in a lot of different ways. It's not just about the contrast, it's also the positioning. It's also thinking about different learners, different people in the room. A good example to go to, because we don't have time to get into this in detail, is this document. I've got to say, the UK government, I mean, I have mixed feelings, frankly. I'm not going to get in political. I have mixed feelings, but uk.gov, really good, or gov.uk, goodness me, gov.uk, other way around, is a really helpful resource. They've created all kinds of interesting stuff around design, actually, at a sort of meta level. The UK government websites and web portals got a complete redesign a few years ago. Really, really good, really great UX, really smart. And the best bit is that they have open sourced a lot of their design. So if you go onto GitHub, the open source platform, you can find these documents on designing for accessibility. If you just Google UK Gov designing for accessibility, you should be able to find it. They've also done it in loads of different formats and languages. You can download all of these documents around best practices in designing for accessibility, which is really cool. And in there, when they were rebuilding all of the UK government websites and portals and interactions, they came up with lots of different kind of models and approaches, and also thinking through how different people understand different content on the web. So I'd really recommend this if you're looking into like building stuff, particularly for like a broad, diverse audience. Here's just a quick example. So I know I'm breaking my own rule of designing for users on the autistic spectrum. You can see on the left, here are some do's and don'ts. That's just one of the pages that are available in this booklet. Really simple, looks really, really simple, but just that, for example, the third one of people on the autistic spectrum use simple sentences instead of creating a wall of text. We know that doing stuff in bullets and short sentences is going to be better. Using simple colors instead of contrasting overlay colors is going to be better. So these are like really simple design rules, but really, really powerful, and will avoid your slide decks not landing with people. All right. So UK Gov for that, Gov UK, whatever it is, I don't even know anymore. One quick example of this, which I quite like, I always use examples. Just to kind of sum this up as a way to design slide decks effectively. Here's an example of a point we're making. 40 people like blueberries most. We have no visual of this for a start. It's not that exciting fact, we think, or maybe an opinion or something. There's probably some data, we guess. This is not great, not the best sort of bit of information to share. Let's make it a little better. We're going to add something. I'm going to remove myself out of the way. Go down here. Here we go. We've got this. We've got a graph now. We can see 40 people like blueberries most. And we've got some text saying, as we see. Okay. That's not the best. There we go. Go over here. This isn't great. We've got no specifics. And we can say, as we can see, right? Going back to Adam Grant's point, we don't need to say that. We don't need to put it on the slide. We can just say, as we can see, 40 people like blueberries the most. Not great either. Not the best. This is on the slide. What else should we not do here? A few common things people fall into. Often when we're talking about stuff, we'll say, here you can see 40 people like blueberries the most, or this result means blah, 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 blah. But we've already lost people because they might not know what we mean by this result. Or we could say the fifth bar on the chart. Well, that means someone's got to read from far away if they're far out, or it's small text, or it's a small image. Like, which one's the fifth? Which one's the sixth? Like, the colors are pretty good contrast, but like, I can't really tell. Again, we're not making it obvious and succinct and clear for people. So probably we're better off with something like this. We should really have text like that, but we might want to make it really specific. We can put the data content on screen for attendees who maybe can't view it. So we can use specific phrases. So if you don't understand the diagram or the graph, then we can say clearly it's in text as well with options available. This will help our facilitation, our delivery. We can make it clear we're removing guesswork. We can also use facilitation skills to direct people's attention. We can actually say, if you take a look at the graph on the right, you should be able to see that blueberries in the blue color, 40 people like those the most. And we can even ask if people can't see that. Now, this sounds really obvious and overdoing it, but if you think about your own content, it's amazing how much we gloss over or just assume that people, and their attention is meanwhile going all over the place. So, as always, knowing our audience really matters here too. Last thing with this, I'd make one little change. So this isn't bad. Here's one change I'd make. I'd make the graph bigger. I'd move the text labels to the left so they're easier to read. And I'd also put that text, the 40 people like blueberries most, nicely on the right-hand side so it's all clearly aligned. We've just got two things on there. We're using two different fonts maximum. We've got clearly contrasting colors. This isn't too bad. This is not a bad way of describing the nicest fruit. So that was just a quick example of going through just using a graph and a bit of text, 4 or 5 different permutations of how we can lay this stuff out so it's accessible, easy to explain, easy for people to look at, and also how we can use a bit of facilitation around it too. Ooh. All right, a couple of questions for you before we go. Here's the first question. Actually, just one question. Just one question. Here's the question. In your slide decks, What could you try to present more accessibly? What could you design? What could you offer? What could you make more accessible? Is it going to be a graph? Is it going to be some sort of text? We'll go back to this one here. Go full screen. Yeah. Would it be a button? Would it be a layout? Would it be colors? What could you present more accessibly in the next time you're creating some sort of presentation? That is my question to you. All right. Last bit of today, just to sum up what we've done today. This has been a good little short sesh today, little Groovebox. Number one, the dancers. The slides at the back in dancers, we don't need them. Look, I can get rid of them. Ho, ho, ho. Slides are back in dancers. We don't necessarily need them. I'm going to try and test myself here. Ho, ho. Try and take my own advice. Slides can be our backing dancers. They are beneficial. They're good to look at. They can help tell the story. We don't need them. It's okay. Number two, got the 10 slides, the 20 minutes, the 30 font size as a guide. 20 minutes before we change things up. Try and use 10 slides at a time before we change things up. 30 font size is always a good way to go, if not bigger. If in doubt, go big. Third thing, think about your flavors. So if you've got a flavor of workshop that's like a technical workshop with lots of content, don't be afraid to use lots of slides. That's okay. If you're doing a craft workshop, people are building, you probably want to do something different. Lastly, think about accessibility. Not just contrast of colors, but also layouts, how we explain things, where we have text. Use that Gov UK resource to help you. All right, that's it. That's all we have today. I have nothing more for you except a lovely little wavetable animation. This has been the Wavetable Groovebox. It's 28 minutes past 12, so it's been a 28-minute session today, quite short, but that's okay. If you want a direct line into the mainframe, you want to talk about workshop design, you want to talk about courses, you want to build offsites, you want to create a social impact program, you want to create any space for people to connect, to learn, to grow, to do great stuff. There it is, howard@wavetable.net. You can send me an email. That is me, direct line into the mainframe of my brain if you want to do that. I would love to hear from you. All right. That's all for this week. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with more goodness from the Wavetable Groovebox. If you have a question, you're also welcome to send me an email. If you have a question that you'd like us to answer on the show, just send us a note. We'll do our best to do a little session on it. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for being here. It's been a delight. This is live on YouTube, LinkedIn, other places. Appreciate you watching, whether you're watching live or in your own time, in the safety and comfort of your own home. Wherever you are, be well, be good. We'll see you next time.